we saw this in the room when we asked about 65 to 70 people, different companies, different sizes, how many had AI initiatives going in 2025. Again, it was about 1 in 4. 25% of the room raised their hands. But when we got to 2026, everyone's hands went up. And so I think what's really important for people to understand, if you're an AI optimist, is number one, if you have strong foundational knowledge of, I would use the word customer experience, right? And when I say customer experience, that can be external customers, like how to attract and retain new customers, but also think of customers internally as well, right? How do you delight and service those inside of the company? And if you have that strong knowledge, that's part one, right? Because if you can start asking yourself, what would drive business performance? Like if you can wave a magic wand, and by the way, using the exact example in the room around learning development programs, they were shocked because one of the things the tool was able to do was talk about how much less time it would take to build learning development plans and how many more of them you can do. So in other words, learning development was only the top 10%. You can do it across the entire enterprise because you can kick it out that fast.
Wow.
Right? So now the next question you need to ask is just from a data gathering perspective, right? So do you have access to data? And then what kind of data does that look like? Because if you can combine the understanding of your business, if you have the data, now you can start incorporating the tools, AI tools, to help drive and get better results, right? Love talking about small business examples because so many people think this is just for the John Deeres of the world.
Buddy.
It's for everyone. If it's your small business and you want to source ingredients, if you're a bakery, you can do that with AI. If you have 2 or 3 Airbnbs and you want to create a surge pricing model, you can do that. I mean, it is putting things on an equal plane that normally large companies would have such an advantage of.
You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by Focus-Biz.com.
Welcome back to another episode. With us today is a fractional CRO for Women Impact Tech, Daniel Friker. We've had an incredible 40-minute conversation before we even hit this record button here about AI, intelligence, human resources, how businesses are using it to leverage themselves. It's just been an incredible conversation. Daniel, I want to welcome you to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Can you tell us more about your journey? You have an impressive resume and the way that you've been helping, people and businesses kind of excel with AI. Tell me more about who you are and how you're helping people today.
Sure. Well, I am a University of Minnesota Golden Gopher. So I started my career, strangely enough, in accounting. Definitely not where I expected to end up in terms of where my career is today. But I quickly realized that real action wasn't in spreadsheets. It was people. And that pivot into workforce solutions really drove me to a 20-plus year career with a company called Manpower Group, where not only to go back to the University of Minnesota to get my master's in HR analytics, but it allowed me to work with some of the best Fortune 500 companies globally, with a variety of different types of talent solutions, putting people to work all over the world for companies like ExxonMobil, Cisco, Microsoft, just to name a couple. And I would say with my current journey, really working in technology and talent solutions. And so I would say where the intersection kind of hits has been really an interesting journey around reinvention. And we did have about a 30-minute pre-conversation about AI. And I guess I will go on record to say I'm an AI optimist.
Absolutely.
And I'm really starting to see, not just read about case studies, but actually real examples, not just from large corporations like GE Healthcare, but even small businesses that are using AI to transform their business strategy and beyond just HR. So, yeah, it's been fun.
It's been incredible just learning all the things that you're creating, implementing, how you're asking the questions, both being a part of certifications or workshops and hosting your own. You're kind of helping these businesses leverage technology and figure out how they can use AI in their business. And it's beyond just a simple chatbot or chat GPT. It's creating software. It's creating content. This is kind of like we're almost at that apex of an incredible piece of software, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface. It's just the beginning of what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I made reference to it earlier. When I was in graduate school, this was at a time where but data analytics is really starting to take hold. You were starting to see data coming out of HR departments, and really companies were using data science to make better decisions around hiring decisions and staffing decisions. And I'll give you two examples. Like when I was in grad school, like one of the grad school projects that we had to do was build a dynamic data-driven model to staff a hospital. And think about hospital staffing as being complex, but it is. If you're overstaffed, you're probably going out of business because you're paying too much for radiologists. If you're understaffed, then people get hurt. I was working with retailers on using SaaS forecast servers to how do you better staff, Best Buy stores, based on time of year, weather, whether or not there was a sale with Samsung, and actually applying some data around just kind of someone's look and feel. When I started getting into the AI journey, I approached it from an HR lens. I didn't fully appreciate, about 2 years ago or so, that it really was about changing the business strategy. And you made reference to it earlier, but, just a couple of weeks ago, I actually hosted 2 AI workshops here in the Twin Cities, which is where I live. And we had, over the course of 2 nights, about somewhere between 65 to 70 companies of different sizes, some big companies, some small companies, where we really explored examples of really good case studies of, AI is really helping companies change. But then the other kind of magic trick that we did in the room, we asked some of the people in the room, what are some of your business challenges? And then actually building AI tools in the room, and then actually walking them through, not just in terms of what it can do, but then even what the best practices to apply them to their business.
Yeah. And a lot of these businesses from these examples, they were kind of blown away with the output, because just the way that you think, your analytical mindset, you're like, okay, what is this obstacle? What is the problem we need to solve? And you gave an output, but you were able to reverse engineer what prompt you may need. And then the fact that it needed an executive summary, you're kind of thinking just similar to AI, where they're thinking 3 steps ahead. Would you like me to also make this or craft this? You're thinking 10 steps ahead.
Yes and no. Because this theme of I'm smart enough to know where I'm dumb. Listen, I've made a lot of mistakes. And I think one of the things I was trying to demonstrate in the room was trying to get people to avoid some of the mistakes that I did. In fact, that maybe that's what the name of this seminar should have been, is don't do what I did. And when you're building AI tools, you're starting to just get into them, right? You're going to make a lot of mistakes. And especially if you're working inside of corporate America, where any type of software has to be blessed by different departments. Your IT department has to bless it to make sure that it doesn't interfere with whatever type of intricate system, that you maintain data security. It depends on what kind of industry you're in. So you could be beholden to GDPR or HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley or whatever. So IT is both an opportunity for them to build the tools, but they can also be your gatekeeper. And then in any type of business, your CFO is always going to control the purse strings, and they're going to want to know what's the return on that investment. And it's part of their job to provide the information to the executive leadership team, to the board. We can invest in X or Y. So if one of the things I was trying to show in the room, and the real example for your listeners, someone said, build me a learning development program. So it was built using ChatGPT, OpenAI's tools. And in the room, we basically were able to show them how to build the necessary prompts. It took about 15 to 20 minutes for it to write 10,000 lines of code. But then the output was a very simple user interface where you can cut and paste a job description in one, and then someone's resume in the second. And not only would it kick out a pretty detailed learning development program for this fictional individual, but it also incorporated that red team analysis, so that you can give it to your IT department to make sure that it was truly compliant with the terms and conditions of the company. And then also allow you to be able to go up the chain to have conversations with the CFO, CEO, or the board to say, this is a worthy investment to the company. And again, people are like, why did you build that in? And it was like, well, let me tell you all the ways people told me no. And so if you anticipate the no, you can build it into the code, and you can get to a real practical working tool that much more quickly.
And I love that this example and everything that you kind of focus on, you're actually trying to better develop the humans using AI as opposed to replacing the humans entirely. You're like, okay, how do we work together? Because there's this balance, right? Like you said, there's this matrix where AI only and humans, where do they intersect, and how do we find that balance where we're still providing opportunities, learning opportunities for people and enhancing them, investing in the workforce and investing in the right tools like the AI and bringing them together. You said there was a big productivity gap that's starting to happen, is going to further accelerate a bit in the future.
Yes. So in the month of October, I constantly subscribe to Fortune Magazine, Wall Street Journal. Fortune Magazine came out with an interesting study that basically was talking about how the 80-20 rule has been around for a long, long time and well-researched all over the world. 80% of your productivity comes to your top 20%. What they were noticing was, on average, the top 20% were likely the first adopters of AI. And you're seeing the data starting to actually show that the gap is widening even more,
Wow.
because, they're starting to really understand having strong foundational knowledge of how the business works. And then if you have that core, plus you're learning about kind of the basic understanding of what these AI tools can do, now you're able to actually implement them and become more efficient in whatever job that is, be it within marketing, HR, sales, or operations. It fundamentally can change your business and vastly improve not just your bottom line, but even top line growth as well. And you're hearing that you're hearing that with these earnings calls from Satya Nadella talking about, CEO of Microsoft, record earnings, record growth, reducing workforce by 9%, but they anticipate even more productivity. So as these earning calls continue to come out, in fact, was it Palantir's quarterly earnings just today hit 1.2 billion, but one of the reasons why their stock is going through the roof is because their outlook is looking so strong because they're harnessing the productivity of AI.
Right. And it's all about these businesses and how they're going to use and leverage AI. It feels like, if you're not adopting AI in some form or fashion right now or in the next year, it's going to be really difficult. And that's going to further that gap as well.
We saw this in the room. When we asked about 65 to 70 people, different companies, different sizes, how many had AI initiatives going in 2025? Again, it was about 1 in 4. 25% of the room raised their hands. But when we got to 2026, everyone's hands went up. And so I think what's really important for people to understand, if you're an AI optimist, is number one, if you have strong foundational knowledge of, I would use the word customer experience, right? And when I say customer experience, that can be external customers, like how to attract and retain new customers, but also think of customers internally as well, right? How do you delight and service those inside of the company? And if you have that strong knowledge, that's part one, right? Because if you can start asking yourself, what would drive business performance? Like if you can wave a magic wand, and by the way, using the exact example in the room around learning development programs, they were shocked because one of the things the tool was able to do was talk about how much less time it would take to build learning development plans and how many more of them you can do. So in other words, learning development was only the top 10%. You can do it across the entire enterprise because you can kick it out that fast.
Wow.
Right? So now the next question you need to ask is just from a data gathering perspective, right? So do you have access to data? And then what kind of data does that look like? Because if you can combine the understanding of your business, if you have the data, now you can start incorporating the tools, AI tools, to help drive and get better results, right? And not only are you looking at, I love talking about small business examples because so many people think this is just for the John Deeres of the world.
It's for everybody.
It's for everyone. If it's your small business and you want to source ingredients, if you're a bakery, you can do that with AI. If you have 2 or 3 Airbnbs and you want to create a surge pricing model, you can do that. I mean, it is putting things on an equal plane that normally large companies would have such an advantage of.
Absolutely. And I had a question specific to kind of how genders and sexes are kind of adapting to technology in general, because the company Women Impact Tech, is there any difference between how men or women are embracing or adopting technology? Is there a learning curve? Have you noticed any differences between them?
Well, you have a couple of problems, right? You have a couple of things kind of going on as we speak. So in my volunteerism, for the last 7 years, I sit on the career advisory board at the University of Minnesota's College of Science and Engineering. So this is the college inside the University of Minnesota system that would incorporate your physics, your astrophysics, chemistry, that sort of thing, right? So we get a lot of data around Office of Admission, public information, so I'm not revealing. This last class, you have 67% of college entrants, at least within the University of Minnesota, which is one of the largest of the Big Ten universities, are women. You're seeing more women attend universities. You're seeing more women attend a variety of specialized schools currently, right? And of course, you can imagine over time, now you're having a disproportionate in terms of the number of women versus men inside of the workplace, especially when you're talking about kind of the knowledge-driven economy, right? So that's on this end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
You have a number of industries, right? I'm not saying anything that is not can be well researched, but you see this within oil and gas, you see this within insurance and banking, or inside certain departments, it can be 90% men, 10% women, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what you really have seen is really kind of an evolution of what, maybe what DE&I was, kind of talked about. And I think what you're seeing though is really some practical applications around something called ERGs, where employee research groups, which is I'm seeing companies kind of evolve and basically say, okay, we want to at least be able to make sure that we're at least getting to an equitable situation where it's at least try to 50-50. Because in the future, if you're a knowledge worker, statistically, you're probably a woman, but yet you have these legacy workforces that might be the exact opposite. And it's our generation that are going to live through this, right? I don't see any fundamental difference, though, in terms of adoption of AI. I really don't. I mean, it's an equal opportunity problem.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating just to learn both the changes. There's different generations that are entering into the workforce, going for higher education. Just that shift in technology, I think, presents new challenges for how do we adapt to the new learning environment. Like you mentioned, just the learning adaptation. How do we kind of find that balance with understanding each generation going forward and adopting technology?
Well, I think you even have another problem, and maybe you touched on it a little bit, which is in that room, again, everyone's hand went up around AI initiatives going live in 2026. Yet when I asked the follow-up question going, okay, what kind of AI content are you doing to actually train your workforce? And then you just had these eyes go wide open. So you also have limited AI content. So like most companies aren't really covering the artificial intelligence in depth. And so a lot of the time, especially with the workshops that I'm doing, and I'm doing another one on November 18th, which is really just to kind of introduce some kind of core fundamentals. We talk a little bit about good case studies of companies that are doing a really good job incorporating AI. And then we're actually showing people, we're like literally asking the room, like, give us a business challenge, and then kind of walking them through an example. And the idea is that they're going to walk out of the room going, over the course of a steak dinner, or even just think of a normal business meeting, sitting down with you in 90 minutes, we can start from a conversation to give me a business problem. By the end of that business meeting, actually saying, hey, Chris, try this AI tool out.
Like here we have a potential solution. We just have to test it now.
Yeah. So let's meet again in a week or 2 weeks and, tell me what's broken with, like, let's kind of like, that's a different type of business meeting.
Yeah. Usually it has to go back to the team and they work on something for a few months and maybe they'll send a prototype in 6 to 8 months. I mean, that's just the turnaround time here. And now you're able to get into that testing, to break the software phase so you can fix it before you go ahead and launch it.
Exactly. So I think we talked about this in the pre-interview, but that's actually one of the best examples of what GE Healthcare is doing. And I think this is another fundamental thing for people. My generation, your generation, we were always kind of taught you make a software decision and then you implement it throughout the company. We're a Microsoft Office shop. We're a Google shop. We're, whatever. What GE Healthcare did was they had 90 plus teams that they put together in pods. It fundamentally only had 3 people: a business leader. So you had someone from marketing, HR, operations, an IT person to actually build the tool, and someone from legal to make sure that the company didn't get sued. But they turned it on its head. And so the functional person was bringing the business problem to the table. And then now you had essentially 90 plus pilots going on in the company that are making the company more efficient. This wasn't coming from the top going on down. The only thing the top down said was, we want to launch more AI projects and we want to go fast and we want to make sure that we're doing it right. So they design these pods accordingly. And that, I think, is such a great paradigm that any company, doesn't matter what size, can incorporate. You don't need a ton. I mean, I'm just thinking of the example in the room, writing 10,000 lines of code a year and a half ago. That would have taken 1.5 months, probably would have cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And who knows if that would have even come close to what we did in the room in 30 minutes.
That is absolutely incredible. I can't believe all these tools and how they're being, implemented and built upon because they're getting smart. I shared before the benchmark was the Will Smith eating spaghetti, and that was
Yeah.
absolutely terrible. But now the AI is writing songs. It's creating these incredible videos that you question yourself: is this real? Is this fake? And it just taking it beyond. We only have a couple more minutes here, Daniel. I wanted to ask you, where can people find out more about you and get connected with you online?
Sure. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Dan Friker, Friker. And that's where I regularly share insights on AI, workforce transformation, business strategy. You can also find me at Women Impact Tech. I love speaking at conferences, appearing on podcasts like this one. And if you're in the Twin Cities, you will probably find me doing workshops all around the Twin Cities.
That is wonderful. And we'll have the links available down in the show notes and the description for everybody. We have 2 more minutes. Daniel, your opportunity to take the floor for any closing arguments, anything you wanted to say, a message to our audience or just the people out there.
Well, I want people to actually have a little bit of hope for 2026. I think we can focus on a lot of negativity and I don't need to point in directions to get there. The reason why I'm an optimist is I started this AI journey. I can see what it's doing and I see how it's helping people in present tense, knowing that all the tools that we have are going to look fundamentally different in 2026. What really gives me energy is how helping people, helping businesses really kind of adapt to this new technology from all types of ages and everything else. So I guess I'm excited to see how this evolves. I see how this is evolving inside different sectors. And I guess the call to action to everyone is, if you haven't really thought about your AI strategy and how this might impact your business, this really is a good opportunity for you to kind of really think about that and get into AI pilots sooner rather than later, because you don't need much time and investment to really make big changes.
Absolutely. Completely agree, Daniel. We appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. And for all of you, check out the show notes and links below. Thank you.
Thank you.